Being craft means more than being small. You've got a lot of work to do, and often the team you have is tiny. In late 2014, I hit the road in search of what it meant to be craft. What I found was a group of dedicated, weirdly scientific people who love making something distinctive. But one question kept nagging at me. Why would you even do this? I asked the question and put it to them bluntly. How crazy do you have to be to want to start a distillery, not only doing that, but start it, in the heart of Toronto?
Yeah, I mean, I think crazy is a good word. It's been absolutely nuts, and the amount of hurdles and hassles that we've had to go through to actually put this thing together have been huge.
It's a lot of work, a lot of hours, especially with a still. It doesn't end at 5. It goes as long as it needs to go.
The amount of work that goes into hauling ingredients around 25 kilogram sacks of grain and a full keg, which is upwards of 125 pounds. It takes a tax on you every day in, day out. So.
Did you start tinkering with brewing, or was it something that you knew you wanted to do?
I have a microbiology background, which is applicable to brewing, but my research that I was doing was not fermentation related at all. And then when I went to Japan and had sake for the first time and started visiting breweries there, it started getting into my head that I actually like doing that more than being in the laboratory. So I just sort of kept migrating more and more towards a hobby and to taking it a little more seriously.
In university, I was 19 years old, doing a degree in biochem, and just started understanding the concepts behind it and seeing where you could go with it, and I fell in love right then.
Took a year off university. The program I was in it was a science program, it was a biology program, wasn't what I wanted to be doing. And I lucked into a job at the Amsterdam Brewing Company as a trainee brewer. It was sort of had a biological bent to it, had a plant growth and development bent. I'm a big plant guy, I like botany a lot. And so the whole malting side and the whole hop side of it, I was really fascinated by. It wasn't anything that I had ever planned to do. I wasn't a 5-year-old saying like, I'm gonna go be a brewer when I grow up. But it's such an interesting mix of art and science. And I like the idea that it is the tools of the art are science. And so the sharper, more finely honed your tools are, the better your art is. And I really like that. Just is the way my brain works. It fits me really well.
For me, it's the best combination of the science behind brewing, the creativity, coming up with new things, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and then getting it out there for people to enjoy.
That's what's so different about distilling as opposed to something like brewing or winemaking. There's not many resources out there. There's basically 2 spots in the world you can go for a degree in distilling, either Scotland or in Michigan. So basically I took off, went to Scotland, soaked in everything I could, did some training in England, went down to the States, went to Michigan State University where they've got their program there, learned everything I could and actually partnered up with them to develop our recipes.
We started reading books, and eventually there was this one guy, and we assumed he'd be from Kentucky or something like that because he was writing all these great books about how to make whiskey. Eventually we figured out his name and everything, and we managed to find out where he was. Well, it turned out he was from our hometown, which is Ottawa. We couldn't believe our fortune. We called him up. Eventually he agreed to meet with us, and eventually one thing led to another. He basically became my trainer, and I was sort of his mentee. You
need to spend time as a young alcohol manufacturer with an older one. It's like people with experience. There's so much to be gained just from that, and especially if you're kind of in the right headspace and you have the right experience behind you.
I was fortunate to find a brewery that was willing to take me on as basically an apprentice. I mean, I was paid, but as I mentioned, I was basically almost volunteering there, and just working and not getting any specific instruction, but just being part of a team and learning that way.
One of the things that I find really interesting is the start-off point, right? The jumping-off point. You, I guess, get the building set up. Stills come in from yonder because there's not, I guess, a lot of still manufacturers left in Canada. How do you get from day one to now?
It is still an enormous leap from kind of learning about distilling to starting a distillery. For me, I was fortunate enough to know, well, my dad and my father-in-law, who my dad's a science background, my father-in-law has the business background. I kind of did a little bit of both in the middle. The three of us kind of coming together, combining forces, were able to convince some people, put a plan together and really make this happen. The people in power, it wasn't anything too crazy. There was a couple specific laws in Ontario that make it a little more difficult, but we found our ways around them.
When we were doing it, we were the first people in the city of Toronto to start a new distillery since 1933. Gotterham's and Wirtz had closed down at the distillery district in the early 1990s. They'd been sold, and they were one of those places that had the CRA man on site at all times. So we were calling and trying to get a little information, and most people had no idea what the heck we were talking about. They thought we were trying to bottle bulk whiskey or something like that. And no, I actually need a still. I'm going to do it all from scratch. And they were just really confused. Eventually we did get it, a little bit of help, but a lot of it came down to just us going through the regulations, going through the documents. I must say one person that was very helpful was we were put in contact with somebody from their measurement department. Who knew the measurement department existed, but it does, and it's a place in Ottawa, and they dealt with things like scales and hydrometers that measure percentage alcohol. That's something CRA is very concerned about, making sure that you have accurate equipment to measure the percentage of alcohol. That's one of the things that they really look for when you're getting licensed. So she was incredibly helpful, and I still remember her name, Diane. She was great. So some people were really nice, and other people just, it was new for them too. We got it done, and I can't say anything bad about anybody at CRA. They weren't there to give us a hard time. But at the same time, some of it they just didn't know always, and it wasn't as easy to be like, well, what should I do? Because they weren't always sure. So,
with the explosion of the craft brewing scene in Ontario right now, it's definitely getting a little easier. They're getting a little more used to people coming in with these ideas, wanting to start breweries. They are becoming more receptive because the craft beer segment of the beer market contains the majority of the jobs. So as far as a job-making industry, and they're definitely being more receptive.
We collectively as craft brewers need to get better and constantly be getting better at producing very high quality, carefully made products that people trust. If people drink craft beer and sort of go, most of the time it's good, but sometimes it's not, that will drive those people to drink maybe import beers, like other specialty beers that they still have some character, have kind of some of the flavors they're looking for, but come from a much larger brewery with control systems and things that are going to make it 1,000 times in a row exactly the same. So as a craft brewer, we share the segment that we live in with imported beer, and that stuff is generally categorically very high quality. And so you need to learn how to get your beer as quickly as you can up to that level, and you can push the design envelope and make really cool tasting stuff, but don't ever push the technical window to the point where you're out of your own depth and you're making mud pies. It may be something that seems like it's a good idea, but it may not be good for craft in general. So as a professional craft brewer, you need to kind of really worry about that.